Hey everyone, this is Joshua Kirk here with you once again. Now it's time for episode 93 of Album of the Day. Before we get into the review, I do want to tell you about this shirt that I'm wearing for the first time. My mom recently went on a school field trip with some of her students from the high school I go to, Rundle High. They took a field trip to the Naval Academy, and she gave me this shirt, so thought I'd, tell you a little bit about that. But anyway, let's just get on to the review. Today's artist for today is a singer-songwriter who was born in Hawaii, but now currently lives in Minnesota. Excuse me. He started out putting music since releasing a self-titled debut back sometime around 1997, independently, under his own rights. He's kind of his music is kind of a mix of folk, and he's I'm talking about a folk pop singer-songwriter known as Mason Jennings, who has been putting out records since 97, as I mentioned. Now I'm here to talk about his 2009 album, released in September of that year, which goes for kind of a different feel from his other records. The album is called Blood of Man, and what really sets this album apart from his past records is, his past records were acoustic guitar driven and had more of a folky feel to them. Plus, he's also known for his very distinctive, voice and really kind of singing with a lot of notes. But yeah, this album, on the other hand, it's more electric guitar driven, and of course I'll talk a little more about that later in this video. But this is his second album on Jack Johnson's Brushfire Records label, his third major label album. His first one came out in 2006 called Bone Clouds, and that was sort of my first exposure to Mason Jennings, was that particular album. I do think it's a really great album. Some really good pop hooks and some great songwriting on it, and of course, some very passionate vocal delivery from Mr. Jennings. And of course, this is the booklet, which has the lyrics in it. It's a very nice artwork on it, too. And a picture on the back of Mason playing the drums, because this album was produced, recorded, and mixed, and performed all by him. There's no other musicians on here. It's all him recording it himself, going for a more raw, kind of less polished sound from Bone Clouds or In the Ever. The first album he released on Brushfire. Anyway, there's the disc. So yeah, that's a CD copy of Blood of Man, the 2009 album by Mason Jennings. So yeah, what makes this album different from his records before this is, of course, I mentioned there's more electric guitars going on this record, so it's got more of a rock feel, which, some of the fans were a little skeptical about him going for more rock feel on here. And also, lyrically, this is a darker album than its predecessors, and it's all because, a lot of the lyrics on here talk about some pretty, heavy experiences from his real life, and there's also talk about like death and also like there's definitely a little bit of but yeah, at the same time there's a few moments on here that feel maybe a little lighter, but for the most part, I think the title "Blood of Man" really fits in with kind of the aesthetic of the record, because there is like blood all over this album. And I think that's a really obvious thing going on the first track on this album, "City of Ghosts," which has also the way Mason Jennings is singing a little bit is a little different. He's singing a little deeper, on this track, for example, pairing with this kind of pairing with this real rhythmic, rock background music. Is that on there? I wouldn't say it's the strongest lyrical moment on the album, but I really do feel like it does open the album really well, because it gives you a clue of what the whole record's going to be like, and, of course, the riff. And, of course, I do really like the riff on that song, as well as Jennings' vocal performance sounds great on here. Excuse me. The next track on here is a song called "Pittsburgh," and this is a true story of some pretty, some pretty, intense stuff that happened during his, during maybe, I think it was maybe during, like, maybe his, maybe, like, mid-adolescent years or something like that. He was, like, living in Pittsburgh. There were lots of things going down, like, his mother forcing him to get out of the house, and he would go to the woods and think two kinds of thoughts. And then, of course, it also talks about his friend's girlfriend committing suicide in the bathroom by ODing, which means, like, taking a drug overdose. And then, of course, talk about, him and his friend going to the funeral, and he has a new tattoo, and, he's all emotional about it, and then, of course, talk about, during the funeral, the preacher said, that she's with God now, or something right now. And then also there's a verse in it that talks about Mason winding up in a hospital in a little room overlooking a graveyard. And then, of course, he's strapped to the bed. And then, of course, they took him outside in slippers and gowns to play basketball on the blacktop. And, of course, it does get pretty dark on that verse, because they talk about, patients, screaming, and nurses running down the hall and all that stuff. So yeah, it's definitely one of the, best lyrical moments on here, because it's really a true story. You can really believe what he's talking about in here. Just like with maybe some of his other songs. His songs have kind of this believability to them that really no other songs have. The next track on here is called "The Field," and this is one that talks about an Iraq war veteran who sadly was just killed in the war. But of course, he's talking about how we supported you just like some of the other warriors that were involved in this whole war thing. But how are we supposed to live now that you're gone? So, like, he's talking about sometimes he goes to the field and wonders, was this veteran buried there after he or she passed away? And this song has just, one of the most just entertaining vocal performances, like in the bridge, he's like that part in the bridge where he's just belting it out when he say, "I wouldn't want no victory, I just want you bad." Like that part is, sorry I didn't do that good of an impression of it, but just the emotion that you feel in his voice, man, just you know, just I can hardly explain how just fantastic that vocal is on that track. Um, but then he kind of goes back to a little more of the folkier vibe with the song "Tourist," which um, has which of course is more acoustic based, and lyrically it's kind of a song about there's kind of the couple kind of sees that there's kind of something missing in the life they made, and they feel a little and it makes them feel bad a little bit now that people are trying to point out kind of the mess they've made, because so it's kind of a song about how we all have that tourist in our heart, like it's a pretty nice metaphor right there. By far, probably the darkest and probably lyrically bloodiest song in the whole album would have to be the song "Black Wind Blowing," which is like a happy sounding, bright little acoustic song, but lyrically it's a murder ballad actually. So yeah, it talks about it's kind of a new level of darkness that Mason has never really took before, but I will admit that this is still a very good and definitely a very this is definitely the one kind of lyrical moment where you could really feel the emotion and really feel kind of the kind of the heaviness that he's dealing with here, because he's talking about killing somebody, like it's pretty unsettling intensity, especially with the line, your scripture won't say, my scripture won't save you when my gun's in your mouth. But then of course musically, since otherwise who wants to listen to a song that sounds heavy musically and heavy lyrically, when it just musically it's sounds all happy and has a really nice harmonica solo in the middle and the end too. So it's definitely one of the standouts on here would have to be this track. And then there's the pretty much the lead track of the whole record is the song "Ain't No Friend of Mine," which has this really just cool bluesy riff going on in there of really cool, this kind of bluesy riff that Mason plays on there, along with this distorted vocal, kind of, mentioning kind of this, dysfunctional relationship that's actually kind of relatively violent a little bit. So yeah, it's definitely the song that pretty much defines the whole album in the sense of darkness and this straight up heaviness musically and emotionally and lyrically too. But by far my favorite song in the record would probably have to be the seventh track on here, "Sing Out," which goes in the more psychedelic kind of territory with this kind of with this guitar riff with kind of this Doppler Leslie effect going on it, as well as some really nice vocals on here that kind of talk about how we're all trying to sing out for wounded warriors, or the blood of man that poured out such a cost, and it's kind of it's kind of this feeling that you get kind of coming again to you, and it's definitely very beautiful lyrical and musical moment on here. Also another pretty psychedelic thing going on here would have to be the the weird echoey piano that goes on here, and then probably I'd have to say probably the most optimistic lyrical moment on the whole album, and musically like very happy moment on here would have to be the song Sunlight, which he like kind of wrote that song for some sort of foundation for the environment of like too much pollution and how we need more light in there. And like, on paper it just sounds cringeworthy and just kind of, like on paper it sounds a little cringeworthy, but in reality, it really actually works. It's kind of, him kind of reflecting on kind of, that little bit, kind of, when you're a kid, everything's kind of carefree and all that. But, as you get older, you don't feel that way as much. So you're kind of, so the narrator's obviously reflecting on his childhood with, a friend of his, and sort of saying, well, I want to, I want to, do more things for you, to try to, maintain sort of that carefree feeling that we used to have that we don't really feel as much anymore. I really like it when he says, if I lived for 1,000 years, I wouldn't feel as good as I did back then. Yeah, I really like that moment. And plus, really nice mix of the like lower electric guitar and the pretty kind of high-strung acoustic on here. Then there's the song Lonely Road, which goes for more kind of, I really like kind of the combination of the acoustic and electric guitar and how they're playing those little notes of like that riff almost has kind of a Modest Mouse kind of feel to it. Like it sounds like something maybe they could have written for The Moon in Antarctica, but with Mason Jennings' own lyrics to pair with it. And then it closes with the title track, Blood of Man, which, is like this real sad, acoustic guitar paired with these lyrics that kind of, once again, the religious topic kind of comes up again, and, I really like that part, like, towards the end where he's, like, belting it out, like, are you calling for the blood of man? Like that part at the end where he's just, belting it out on the vocal, just, incredible. So yeah, I think, overall, this is definitely one of Mason Jennings' best albums. The sound has changed a little bit, but not too much, though. It's still definitely a Mason Jennings album, because, like that voice and all that, but it's just, got a whole new dynamic to it that, if he were to do this with another producer, it probably wouldn't sound as good. I think, it sounds great the way it is with him, not just writing the whole record, but also, playing all the instruments himself and, trying to manage everything on his own. He pretty much managed everything on his own with this album, except for, the mastering or something like that. So yeah, I do think it's pretty cool how he managed to make such a strong record out of just, kind of recording in, his basement, and giving it kind of, and recording it's pretty raw and lo-fi kind of, gems right here. So yeah, that's my review of Blood, I will admit, Bone Clouds is a good album, and The Ever is good too, but I think where he really does kind of, do it his own way and really make it work and really crank out some of his strongest songs to date, it would definitely have to be this one album right here. So yeah, that's my review of Blood of Man, the 2009 Mason Jennings album. I'll see you for episode 94.